Hi everybody, we're going to get started. We're hoping that one of our panelists, Bronwyn, sneaks in at some point over the next few minutes, but until then,
we'll sneak in right now.
So while she's getting settled, thank you very much for joining us today at the December IPAC event. I'm Shannon Crawley, I'm a member of the board, and I chair the New Professionals Committee. The New Professionals Committee is a new committee that we started at the beginning of this year, and it was adopted by the Board of Directors in June. Our goal is, among other things, to broaden networks among professionals, build relationships across public service, and provide opportunities for leaders to share experience and knowledge with new professionals. In the spirit of this goal, we are grateful today to be joined by a panel of professionals with a wealth of experience to share. I'd like to thank each of our panelists for joining us, particularly given this busy time of year. We're all very grateful for your time. In early 2016, we're planning to launch our IPAC mentorship program, which I'll speak to briefly after our panel presentation. And we would certainly invite each of you to give this program some consideration, keeping in mind how mentorship can contribute to our shared experience in the public service. Also, I'll quickly remind everyone, we have a raffle for anyone who's joining us today who isn't an IPAC member. We are raffling off a free new professional membership for next year. So if you haven't already entered your name, you can do so at any point in the box at the registration table. So moderating our panel today, we have Archie Sidhu, a member of the New Professionals Committee, who works as a Senior Policy Advisor at GNWT, Department of ECE. With that, I'll turn it over to Archie.
Thanks, Shannon. Can anyone hear me without the mic? I'm not going to use the mic. I'd like to thank Shannon Crawley, our leader of the New Professionals Committee, who has done a lot of work in putting this together. I'd also like to echo her thanks and thank our panelists for coming out, because it is a very busy time of year, and I think it's important that they come, and it's nice to see that we have such great support across the public service and the NWT for these sort of events. I will begin by briefly introducing the panelists, and I will encourage questions throughout the session. I think we prefer more back and forth than me just asking questions rattle off. If you have a question for a specific panelist, that should be okay, or you wish for some more clarification on an answer that they've given, I think that's also fine. Now, just to briefly introduce our panelists, I'll begin with Bronwyn Waters, the Deputy Minister of Human Resources. Bronwyn Waters was born and educated in Australia and worked as a child clinical psychologist before immigrating to Canada. She began work for the GNWT in 1978. Initially hired as a special education coordinator, during which time she worked in schools throughout the NWT, before moving on to become the Director of Social Programs. She subsequently spent over 30 years in senior management across the GNWT as Director of both Program and Policy Divisions in Health, Social Services, ECE, and Justice. She was AD of both Social Services and Justice, and ultimately retired in 2012 as the Deputy Minister of Justice. She was awarded the Dave Ramsden Career Excellence Award in that same year. Following her retirement, Bronwyn served as the Commissioner of the NWT Human Rights Commission and the GNWT Executive Lead for the Territorial Anti-Poverty Strategy. She has now recently returned as the Deputy Minister of Human Resources. Bronwyn lives on the shores of Great Yellowknife Bay, where she enjoys canoeing, adventuring with her husband Andy. She's big into photography and volunteers with the Yellowknife Community Foundation. I would like to next introduce Ben Hendriksen. Ben is originally from St. Catharines, Ontario, where he completed an undergraduate degree in political science before going on to complete a master's in public policy at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. In 2011, Ben moved to Yellowknife as a policy analyst for the WSCC. He would eventually move into the manager's role of policy and programming before taking on his most recent endeavor, which is the one-year term as the Chief Governance Officer and Senior Advisor, reporting directly to the Governance Council and Chairperson of the WSCC. Next, we have Jason Doiron. Jason is originally from PEI, where he received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Computer Science from the University of PEI. Jason began his management career for managing a software company in PEI before moving to Yellowknife in 2007. He moved to Yellowknife as a senior systems analyst and then became manager of application systems with the Department of Health and Social Services. Jason moved to the Department of Finance in 2014 to take on the role as manager of SAM and Sustainment. Jason holds certificates in leadership, change management, and Prince 2 project management methodology. His free time, Jason enjoys skiing, traveling, and singing in the Yellowknife Choral Society. Next, we have Zoe Raymer. Zoe joined the GNWT's Devolution implementation team in 2013 as the Director of Planning and Communications, and subsequently took on the duties of Director of Corporate Communications. She is a proud career public servant. After a short stint in media, she served for 21 years with the Government of Canada in Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development's NWT Regional Office. The majority of Zoe's career, 15 years, has been in the communications field. For a decade, she was the Director of Communications, followed by 6 years as the Associate Director General. She has a Bachelor's of Education degree and has lived in the NWT for 26 years. And last but certainly not least, we have Judy Kainz. Judy has worked in a variety of fields, including industry, manufacturing, construction, and utilities, and for the last 7.5 years has worked as a chief safety officer for the Worker Safety and Compensation Commission. Earlier this year, she moved to the Director of Prevention Services role. Over the last 25+ years, she has mentored and worked with both young and not so young people who are interested in building career in occupational health and safety and working here in the NWT. If you could please join me in thanking our panelists for coming. So we will begin by asking the questions. Each panelist will give their answer. Once again, if you guys want to add on or want some clarity, I encourage you guys to please ask questions. So beginning with Bronwyn, if you could please briefly describe to everyone here today sort of the experience that you have had with working with new professionals in the NWT.
Once upon a time, long ago, having spent as long in the GNWT as I have, I've certainly had a lot of I should be using this.
We're recording now, so which is why we have to.
You could be a star on YouTube, Bronwyn.
Fulfillment of my childhood dreams. Working with new professionals. I mean, I was one once upon a time, sort of in the midst of the past, and over the years, I never really made that distinction. People are people are people, and they come with different skills, different abilities, different interests, different priorities. But certainly, when anyone comes into the public service, whether they're young, whether they're older, the whole point, I think, is to first of all have them feel that they are in an environment that they are wanted, that they are valued, that they have something to contribute. And I guess one of the sort of my guiding principle has been to sort of two parts. One is to provide challenge, one is to provide opportunity. So it's important to set goals for people to help young professionals, new professionals feel challenged, feel significant. I mean, it's really discouraging when you go into a job where you don't have any clear guidelines, when you don't have any clear parameters, you don't really know what you're doing, and your boss doesn't know what you're supposed to be doing. So it is important to give people clarity. Certainly, when I first entered the public service, the GNWT public service at least, I was already in my 30s. I wasn't that young. But I was brand new, and I didn't understand the North. But at least I knew I didn't understand the North. And so, the guidance I received from people who spent, a lot of time living and working here was critical to me as a new, if not young professional. I think support, challenge, opportunity are the key factors in welcoming anybody and helping anybody into a new position. And I talk too much. I'm sorry.
That's perfect.
It was perfect.
Bronwyn, if you could just turn your mic off and then
Sure. So it was perfect. I wrote down, as you said, people are people. That to me is really key to all of this, is that you know, a lot of people think new professional, you think just young professional, and I think that's one of the reasons why Shannon asked me to do this. I'm on the new professionals committee with, you know, a few of these other people, and I kind of sit on that both sides of it. I'm young, I'm also really new in my career. I'm 4.5 years in, so it's exactly as Bronwyn was saying, it's that support that to Yellowknife into the Northwest Territories. The thing that keeps you here is that opportunity. So I think the biggest thing that I would say to anybody sitting in the audience is, you know, wondering, what do we do here? How do I make my impact? Is take every opportunity that runs your way. I mean, make sure it fits with your ultimate career goals and what you want to be doing in terms of work, but take advantage of every single opportunity to get your hands on. Do not say no to one of those opportunities. Do not say, oh, I'm a little too busy right now. Take it, run with it, and do what you can with it, because that'll just lead to more and more opportunities for you down the line. Other than that, I think we'll leave it at that for now and pass it down the line.
Thanks, Ben. In preparation for today in the panel, I kind of was reflecting on myself as a new professional and thinking, wow, I've passed that point in my life now. I'm no longer a new professional. When I moved to Yellowknife 8 years ago now, I guess 8.5, I was a new professional, but having the opportunities that my fellow panelists have been speaking about, you quickly become, you know, quite experienced quite quickly here, and providing you know, jumping at those chances, as Ben was saying, that come your way. You know, any type of acting assignment, that was my, I guess, foray into management, was an acting assignment for me, had come up at Health and Social Services, and I took that acting assignment gladly. And that acting assignment lasted for quite some time and turned into a full-time management opportunity for me. So I can say that that is a true statement, to take those opportunities as they come. It won't be long before you're no longer a new professional anymore, and you want to look back on that time as something that was beneficial for your career, taking those opportunities, but you know, an enjoyable experience. And I think in Yellowknife and the GNWT specifically, there is an opportunity to do that here and learn a lot very quickly. Thanks. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. He's also the procurement dude. That's my name for him. So I'm definitely not a new professional. I'm barely even professional. I guess what I want to say is that I've been a public servant for 23 years. 21 of those I've been a manager in the public service, and so clearly, and I started when I was about 27. I, like some of these folks here, was somebody had confidence in me. I don't know why, but they did, and they offered me an opportunity to, you know, expand my experience and offer whatever it was that I could to the organization that I worked for. And I stayed there for a very long time because those opportunities existed. I think I don't know if this is outrageous or simply de rigueur for somebody who's been in the public service for the period of time that I have, but I probably hired, well, dozens of people in my, you know, over my tenure, several dozen people, and I would say 50% of those had been or have been new professionals, folks who are new, sometimes new to the work world, but more often new to the public service. And I guess the thing that really I believe in is a commitment to service. If you want to be a public servant, the ethic that we all need to bring to that is the idea of service. And so I always feel that I am in service to those that I work with and for, and particularly to those we serve, strangely enough. And that was taught to me by the people that I worked for, so I hope I've left them with some of that as well.
Thanks. Lots been said. Just when everybody was talking, I was thinking, you know, when I first started out way back when, my first job as moving from in an industrial environment into an occupational health and safety full-time, I got this job as the assistant to the coordinator. Great, I'm going to learn. I had the schooling, I had all that. I just needed to learn from somebody, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to have somebody to mentor me. And the first day on the job, I'm looking for this coordinator person, and I'm looking, and I thought, well, maybe they're on no coordinator. I was the assistant to no one. So one of my first jobs was I changed my title. You know, and the hard part of that was then there was nobody, and so it was learning a lot through trial and error. And so for me, it's always been important when I'm working with new people, no matter whether they're the age, is I don't want to treat anybody the way I want to be treated. Treat people the way you want to be treated, you know, and nobody should have to learn that way, you know, and you shouldn't have to stumble around and feel incompetent when somebody standing right beside you knows the answer. So, you know, it's sharing the knowledge with people, and that to me has been the thing that I always, you know, sometimes you get busy and you forget to take the time, and you have to back up and stop and wait and listen and answer questions and share your experience so that way people can learn. Because, you know, no matter the age of any of us or how long we've been in our jobs, we're always learning, and to me, I never stop, and I learn as much from the new person. You know, it's kind of neat when they come in and they're looking at things totally different than what you're looking at them, and so it teaches us to change up our angles a little bit. And, you know, when they're asking, why are you doing that? Well, and I never wanted to be one of those people that said, because this is the way we've always done it. And all of a sudden I'm there. So it makes me turn around and say, I don't know, can you think of a better way? You know, so that to me is important and has been one of the things that sort of guides me as I've moved through my career.
Thank you, Judy. I don't see any questions right now, so I will go on to the next one I have here. And this time maybe we'll start with Judy and go down to Bronwyn. I invite the panelists to reflect on a decision they made in their professional career, ideally maybe at the beginning of their career, that they think served them well, and maybe one that they wish they followed up on more when they first started here in the NWT.
Caught me off guard. This one, the first thing that came to mind was when I was younger, I tended to shoot from the hip really fast and not think before I spoke, and not necessarily cared about whose feelings I hurt, or, you know, it needed to be said and I was going to say it. So for me, that caused me a lot of, and caused everybody different pains over my career. So for me, it was really think before I speak, but you can think about things too long that you've lost the moment, and it no longer matters. So I think that for me is one of the big lessons that I learned early on, to, you know, take 2 seconds, think about it, how important is it, and then phrase it properly, and keep it unpersonal, or take the personalities out of it. It's critical. Thanks.
One thing that I should have done differently, there's a few of them, but I guess the one thing that I would say that I would not change is that I took two, I don't know, edicts into my professional career, and one was authenticity. I wanted to be exactly the person that I am in the workplace too, so you know, that comes with the good and the bad, and sometimes the shocking. But in that case, it was really important to build the relationships inside the workplace from an authentic perspective. So I'm Zoe, I'm Zoe, I'm Zona, I'm all these people, but I am, I hope, exactly the same inside the workplace and outside the workplace. And I want, you know, to be able to build those relationships inside the workplace on the basis of that authenticity. And it's, you know, sometimes felt risky. I'm old, so I remember being part of a management team as a young person and really saying, by the way, you need to know something really important about me. I'm single. No, I said I was gay. And that was important for me to be able to, to have that conversation. That was in the days when it mattered, I guess. Not sure it really mattered then, because the degree to which I was accepted and treated as a member of the team was no different than had I been purple. So for me, that authenticity is important. And then as a manager, I wanted to, you know, I was also told by one of my managers, there's no monopoly on brains. And so the more people that were around the table, the more likely we were to find a solution. And so my other edict was, I guess it's twofold. One, hire people smarter than you. And secondly, choose to do the right thing. And there's often times when we are in positions where we have to make choices. First of all, take the active role of making the choice, and understand that that often comes with a decision that you have to make from your set of values. And so choose to do the right thing. And that may be a difficult thing, and it may be not something that you're
Great, thanks. I think for me, one of the biggest kind of, I guess, decisions that I made in my career that affected kind of my career path was really be willing to, for me, take a risk. I'm someone who can get very comfortable with kind of how my days go, where my job is going, and if I don't kind of come out of that, take my head out of the sand and really kind of look at where I'm going and where my career path is going, I'll stay stagnant. And so kind of two things come to mind around that stagnancy is, one was moving to Yellowknife. Well, that was a big one. So we're all here now. But I think the second one for me, and I was after talking to a lot of people, was making the decision to move from a department where I felt very comfortable, very accepted, I knew my place very well, to a new department that I had no idea how it operated, what the values of the department were. But I knew that there was an opportunity that for me, I could really gain a lot of value. So for me, was grasping at an opportunity to take a different path in my career, get out of my comfort zone, because it was very easy to get comfortable in my job when I was at Health and Social Services. And I wanted to really challenge myself and stop the monotony of doing the same thing every day, just trying something new and getting a new challenge. So moving departments was a huge decision in my professional career that kind of changed where my career path was going.
So I wrote down right when state who you are. The second you walk in that organization, people are going to assume that's who you are, and they're going to run with that afterwards. So if you can't establish yourself in your new position, in your organization, this is my personality, this is what I stand for, I'm going to speak truth to power in a diplomatic way. If you can't do that right away, and make sure that people understand that's who you are, you're going to have a really hard time 3 months down the line when you're in that meeting and you disagree with everything that's being said around the table for a very strong ethical reason, and now you speak up, because people are going to be thrown for a loop. Why now? So I really think that is a really important point that Zoe made. I also would agree with what Jason was just talking about in terms of challenging yourself in terms of your positions and shaking things up. You know, one of the things that is very common same role for many, many years. Everybody knows it's not what we do anymore. I mean, Harji gave the example. I've been with the WSCC for 4.5 years. This is technically my 4th position in the organization, because there's opportunities that arise and people are okay with you grabbing them. And if you've established yourself as that's who you're going to be, as that person who wants to keep contributing and find a new way to contribute, people are going to say, hey, here's something new that fits you, go for it. And I think that's really important for you, for new professionals and for managers who are managing new professionals, to not think, oh sweet, I have somebody here now and I'm never going to let them go. Let them go, because they're probably going to make a bigger impact somewhere else.
There you go. Thank you, man.
Thank you. I actually had a lot of trouble with this question because I think we make decisions constantly. We always make decisions, big ones and small ones, and the same decision can have both positive and negative impacts. And sometimes it's very hard to tell whether making a different decision would have led to a better or a different outcome. And certainly one of the it wasn't so much a decision as a lack of decision on my part, which in terms of all the management books, all the career development books, was a very bad one. I never had tracked out for myself a career path. I never said, this is what I want to be when I grew up. I don't think I ever really believed I was going to grow up. But I didn't do that. I didn't map out a path for myself. That was probably foolish in many ways, but the flip side of it was good because it allowed me to be open to opportunities that came my way that didn't necessarily fit that. So, looking at the decisions, I think, looking back over my whole career, the times when decisions I've made, or again, sometimes failure to make decisions, when it has been a bad mistake, it's been when I haven't gone with what I felt. When, you even hiring somebody and you think, I really want to hire that person, but I don't because for some reason the other person is maybe technically more skilled or whatever. Or where you feel that there's not a good fit, but you go ahead with the hire anyway. Where you're in a hurry and you get a letter that has to go out. It's got to go out, it's got to go out, it's got to go out. You don't read it, you don't go over it carefully, you don't think of the impact it's going to have on the other person. And you don't feel good about it, but you just do it because you're in a hurry. All these things are when I've regretted my decision, or failure to make a different decision is probably a more accurate way of saying it. And I want what Zoe and Jason have said in terms of, no, it was Ben who said, in terms of being true to yourself. You've got to be who you are, and when you try to be somebody else or meet somebody else's expectations of what you should be, it doesn't work, because we are who we are. And the other thing too is to not be afraid to make a mistake. I think sometimes we constrain ourselves in our action because we might do it wrong. I've done lots of things wrong, but it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that as managers, that one of the things, that's what we need to do too, to help people realize that it's okay. If you're trying, of course you're going to make mistakes because you haven't done it before. That's okay. I guess that's it.
Thank you.
For now.
Thank you, guys. Just a quick announcement, thanks to Ben's request. Premier McLeod has been re-elected as Premier, if anyone was wondering.
Yes, of course.
So that's not what the questions are about now. I'll let you guys gossip on the way back to work. And just to start with Bronwyn again, in your experience, what are some of the challenges present in the public service in the NWT, especially when dealing with the retention and recruitment of new professionals?
The challenges tend to, they change over time. Obviously we have the obvious ones of distance for people who come from the south or from further away, being away from family. But again, it's a challenge and it's the opportunity that that go hand in hand. Being part of the community that is the North is incredible. One of the challenges is that so while it's difficult because there aren't a lot of people there aren't a lot of other, if you're a professional, there aren't a lot of other people in your field to provide collegial support. There aren't a lot of people to provide professional mentorship, management mentorship maybe, but there aren't professionals who are higher up in the field. But again, what this means is that as a professional, you get to do things far wider range of things than you could in the South. And you know, my husband, when he first came north, was a psychologist. I remember him saying, you know, it's really hard because there aren't the specialists here I could refer to, but I get to see one of everything. You know, I get to see everything that I would never see in the South. And so that's, you know, the challenge and the opportunity, the isolation, but again, this is the opportunity for travel and for experiencing different ways of living. So, you know, it's the cost of living. You know, there are all the obvious ones, but I think the opportunity far outweighs it.
Everything Bronwyn said. What I would add is, in terms of doing your job, get out of the bubble as much as you can. The challenge to that, as Bronwyn said, is we're a huge jurisdiction, and in the case of Judy and I, we cover 2 territories. WSCC still covers the NWT and Nunavut, so we're covering 80,000 people across a third of the country. It creates huge challenges in the business that we're in. But get out of the bubble as much as you can, and I'm not saying necessarily the physical bubble, because that travel budget just is not there. But get out of there, talk to people, call, pick up the phone. You know, if you're doing, I mean, from my background, policy research, pick up the phone and call people in the community if you have to. Call your counterparts in other provinces. What are they doing? Reach out and don't just stick to what's going on in your office and sort of what's been handed down to you in terms of this is exactly what you're supposed to develop. Go and make those connections yourself, because as Bronwyn said, you're now the expert in a lot of cases, and you might not just be the expert on one topic, you might be the expert on 3 or 4 topics that you never knew you knew anything about. But now you need to go find out about these things, and don't be afraid to go hunt and tell people, as Judy said earlier, I don't know this. You tell me, give me this information. To me, that getting out of that mental bubble, I guess would be the best way to describe it, is sort of the biggest challenge in your jobs. Because we're so isolated as a territory and as a city, it can be very easy to sink into that bubble, and popping that bubble is really important.
Thank you. In my public service experience, I think the biggest challenge has been recruiting I guess, highly skilled technical resources. My background is computer science. I do work in information technology here in the GNWT, and finding resources in the technical field, and I know it's not just information technology, any technical field, has how those work within the GNWT. I've run a lot of competitions for those over the years, which is good. Learning the tools that are out there, you know, it's really important to work with your partners at HR and whatnot that can help you with those things. But for me, technical resources have been really challenging within the public service. So what that means is there's a lot of experience. So if you know anyone, make sure you encourage them to come up here to provide that technical expertise. The other thing that I've noticed in the public service is there's a lot of couples that will move to Yellowknife for a job, perhaps with the GNWT, where one person in the couple gets a job with the GNWT, the other one doesn't quite like it in the north, maybe didn't get the job they were hoping for. What I say to those kind of situations has been huge for me, getting involved in activities outside of work, because there is a lot to do up here. Despite our small jurisdiction and our weather, there is a lot to do. So that's been one challenge that I've had to overcome, kind of as I've been recruiting here in the north, for sure.
So for 21 years, I worked for the federal. There were many, and one of them was, it was not about the public service in the north, explaining the north to those I worked with in the south. And what I think was important about that was it honed a skill in me, and that was about, you know, making sure I understood the people I worked for, and by that I don't mean my bosses, I mean the citizens of the NWT, and I always saw them as the basis for what I was doing. And if I couldn't understand and know them and advocate, because I did, you know, in some ways see myself as an advocate for northern issues within the federal public service. Now, I was a small cog in a very large organization, but there was a role to play, particularly within the department that I worked for. When I started, it was Diane, then it was INAC, and then it was ANSI, and now it's INAC again. So, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Was to be able to advocate for the issues here and in elsewhere. And so seeing that role as one of the roles I played, and it's funny because when I came to the government of the Northwest Territories, you'd have thought that I migrated in from planet Xenon or something. Like, I mean, I was welcomed with open arms, and I absolutely don't want to leave the impression otherwise, but the idea that I was just as much an advocate for Northern issues across the street in my former home as my colleagues now in the government of the Northwest Territories, you know, sometimes doesn't occur to folks. And so I think fostering intergovernmental various levels of government, I think is really important, because we all have it at our heart as public servants, serving those who live here and the citizens that need the services we provide.
For us, or for myself, probably the biggest challenge is the recruitment and retention, just as everyone else has said. You know, and because, as Ben said, we do operate in the NWT as well as Nunavut, so we recruit for both jurisdictions. So, and the things I've learned, or the hard part is, it's one thing, you can get the technical people, and you're hiring them for this job, but you're also asking them to uproot their whole personal life as well and make that transition. And for those that have moved for a bus, and what time is it coming to get me, sort of thing. So what I try to do, you know, we bring them up for site visits and stuff, is I don't want to paint a picture of it's a bed of roses, but at the same time I don't want to paint it as being all negative. So it's really giving them a clear picture of things and making sure that they understand, but not just them, that the information they're going to take back to their families when they're making the decision, you know. So if I think one of the funniest was, we brought a gentleman up, and over in Nunavut we have housing there still, and she had questions about the size of the ice box, so I was taking him over to the apartment so he could take a picture of the ice box so that she could see it, so she knew exactly what she needed an ice box for. So it's trying to be accommodating for not just the person that we're recruiting, but for the family as well, so that way they all fit in and they make it a home. And that's the thing I really try to stress to them when they're coming up, is that, you know, it is an adventure, but you need to make it a home here as well. And so sometimes we've been successful and sometimes not so successful. So, but the things I look for when people I think Bronwyn said it really well, is, you know, sometimes it's following my gut instinct on when you're talking to somebody and you're interviewing them. On paper it looks awesome, but there's just something, and so it's making sure they have. I joke with our group because I tell them I want people to sparkle, you know, and it's making sure they have that sparkle to be able to adapt to whatever challenges come about. You know, if you're traveling someplace and the plane doesn't come and it's Friday and I'm not going home, well, you know, you can sit there and pout, or you can get out and see the community you're in and enjoy it. So, and those are the things that we look for, so that people can adapt, and that for us is really important. So that's some of the biggest challenges for us, is really the size of the jurisdiction and the type of work we do. We could train them to do a lot of things, but you can't train them to be happy here. So, and that's really the thing they need to bring with them. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. And maybe I'll just get, and Judy, if you want to add on, sort of answer this question. Could you just sort of talk about successful approaches you've had in retention and recruitment? That is an issue not only in the NWT, but across Canada. And I think maybe if you could talk about your experiences in both retention and recruitment efforts with new professionals, and what you've seen as successful, that'd be very interesting. I don't know if you...
Some of the examples I gave, but also for in our career, what we're looking for is occupational health and safety specialists. And I think Bronwyn really nailed it with her husband in that, you know, the opportunity to see many different things in that, so that you're not just, you know, for myself, I came up with a strong industrial background. Well, there's no industry, you know, there's no widgets going down a process line here. So the opportunities to be creative and think outside the box, and those are the things that we talk about with and I think it's great to have that career path, but there's so many opportunities here in the north that your career path may be going this way, but because of an opportunity all of a sudden that you never even, I mean, if anybody had told me 20 years ago I'd be sitting here today, I would have laughed at them, you know. So, but it's having that path, but being open to the opportunities, and I think that's the thing that I really like to encourage for everybody that works for me, or that I encourage that, you know, make sure you take advantage of, you know, open the door a crack and see if you like it. If you don't, well, you close it and you carry on with the path, but at least you've had a peek. So.
You know, I think the most important thing in terms of recruiting, there's processes and practices that you have to follow, and I guess two things I would say is understand the work that you're offering, the people that you're recruiting, and if you can make it interesting. If it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting to them. And so hiring somebody who can make a difference, who can contribute to ensuring that citizens, you know, want to contribute to a north that is stronger, more vibrant and vital. How can that, you know, so my perspective on my work has to influence the way I recruit, and I love my job. I've always loved the jobs that I've had. Hopefully that, you know, is an indirect way to ensure that the people that, you know, come to work with me are interested as well. And you know, how do you keep them? By keeping that work interesting, by giving them challenges and opportunities to grow, by turning to them in times of need, and to look to their strengths for solutions. Scattered amongst the provinces and territories of this country are people I hired, and I'm so proud of what they've accomplished, and to have had even the smallest part in contributing to the public services of the Government of Canada, the Government of Yukon, the Government of Nunavut. It's an incredible feeling of accomplishment, and I've always said that when I leave the public service, I don't care if anyone says, Zoe, you're the best employee I ever had. It doesn't matter to me. But if someone once says, you're the best boss I ever had, then I'll feel like I did my job. And those folks that are out there, hopefully they feel the same way about the role that they're taking on as they continue through their career.
I think that for me, as mentioned, success with that was we really took a hold of a co-op program that offered health informatics down in University of Victoria. So we started encouraging through that program them starting to apply on term positions with the GNWT. That worked out very well for the Department of Health. They were very interested in coming north. So we thought it would be for short terms, 4 months, 6 months, what have you. But out of the 5 folks that we recruited through that program, 4 of them became GNWT permanent employees. One of them became a project director through the program, and then worked its. It's been a very successful program for us, reaching out, figuring out what your niche is. Where across Canada are people interested in what you're doing, and reaching out, picking up the phone, or doing some research online to really take it in your own hands to find out where you can find really good resources, and finding those sparkly people that exist, either here in the territories or outside, to really engage them in the work, the interesting work, because we're all doing interesting work that we're doing up here in the north.
So from a manager perspective, make sure, and I talked about this already before, it's about establishing everything at the start. As a manager, make sure that it's clear that you're willing to be challenged and willing to be told you're wrong. Because if you don't do that, people will not challenge you and people will not tell you you're wrong when they should. And as an employee, again, establish that relationship right at the start. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to tell you when I think you're wrong. Do it in a diplomatic way. Establish those relationships right at the start. From that recruiting perspective and the retaining perspective, that's very, very important. From a recruiting perspective, I know every time I've been in an interview, I always explain exactly who I am as that person, as that employee, and Judy knows because she hired me once and I worked for her for 8 months. So she knows when I walk into that interview room, the kind of answers I'm going to provide and the fact that I'm going to say, this is who I'm going to be as your employee. You either like it or you don't. And it's a tough one to do, I know. To be that person in the job that you have. I think you have to have the guts to be able to say, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to do it. Do you like it or not? That's up to you now to decide. To give that gut feeling to that manager, to really know fairly, do they have that gut feeling in you to run with you?
Don't you come and work for us?
I would love to. But I think Dave would be happy if I stayed around for a while.
I think so. I won't speak so much to recruitment because I think that's been fairly well covered. But I do want to talk a bit about retention because I don't believe in retention too much. One of the things I think that's important is we want to keep or even my government, my GNWT, it has to be, is this person in the best place to serve the public, whether it's in our government, whether it's in an Aboriginal government, whether it's in a municipal government, whether it's in a board or agency. Now, and I think one of the things we need to do, if we want to keep people, good people in the north, is to give them opportunities not only within our department, but sort of criticized if we lose good people. But as far as I'm concerned, if this person moves on to another opportunity where they can do something new, different, where they can use their skills more completely, that's okay. And so being open, and anybody from human resources, don't take me too literally just yet. but really, people, allowing people to move on, helping them develop, and I think that's so important because what we're all about, like I said, serving the public. And the best way to do that is to have people in positions where they're best suited and where they can best use their skills. So that's sort of my perspective. And just be, if you want to keep people here, give them the opportunities, give them the challenge, give them your time, because people need to feel appreciated, not just because they get a good performance appraisal, but because people actually interact with them on a daily basis. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'll just look around and see if there's any questions from anyone in the audience. Yes, if you could just speak up, please. We are filming this.
25 years plus experience in the IT industries. And I'm curious to know how, you talk about recruitment, you talk about retention, etc. But I hear an awful lot about, you're looking for candidates out of the South. How much is the affirmative action program up here in the North and localization, how much does that affect your decision in regards to recruitment?
Thank you for the question. Maybe Bronwyn, you mind starting us off?
Well, the affirmative action policy obviously is a very real component of recruiting for the GNWT. And it's something which, has been there for quite a while now. It's gone through many transitions in terms of what it used to be, and it's still south. We do. It's like so many things. It's a matter of balance. But it's getting the qualified person for the job. Where there are two qualified people for the job, the person from the north will have the advantage. And that's under the affirmative action policy. But it doesn't only apply to northerners. We also give opportunity to women in certain positions, and I don't want to talk about that too much. Abilities, so we give them special opportunities too at times. It's I guess the sort of the bottom line is we're trying to have a representative workforce, which is a workforce that truly reflects the population of the Northwest Territories in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of abilities, and that's sort of our bottom line. However it happens, that's the goal.
Yeah. This is an interesting one because I am from the South originally. I was hired from down south. And I realized when I got here how rare that is, actually, especially when there are so many qualified candidates in the North. And I think Bronwyn said it perfectly, is you still have to be qualified for the job. See the position actually, being operating, and you create the interview question and all of the tests around it so that you ensure you get somebody who's qualified for the position. It really doesn't affect your actual decision making per se, because you should get somebody who has the skill to do the work. So I think that's from that management perspective, that's where it really comes to. And then in terms of up here, so you often are having to reach south in order to pull people up. But I think, again, if you set up, this is the job I need done, here are the parameters around it, and make it very clear, there really isn't for that hiring manager a whole lot else to consider other than that, because you will get somebody who is meant to fill that position.
I think so, being in the IT kind of space here within the GNWT and mentioning in prior questions that it is, a difficult to fill, not south, not north, just in general. We do hire often from the south, given the qualifications necessary for the job, the education experience. But one of the actual, just kind of flip it to the positive, one of the great experiences we've had is through the summer student program, as well as outreaching to schools and career fairs, where we went and talked about, well, what does IT really mean, and what kind of jobs are possible? So I know when I was at Health, our CIO, our Chief Information Officer, had gone to career fairs across the schools in the North, because we feel that there's not quite a large awareness, perhaps, of what opportunities exist in the IT space. So given that we've had some great opportunities to hire some students through the summer student program, the intern program, that are Northern residents, and that have applied to those programs, so it's been quite successful for us.
I was just trying to calculate in my feeble old mind, of those dozens and dozens of people that I've hired, how many I've hired from the South. And to be honest, I can't think of one. I mean, I have as a co-op student who then became a casual, and then basically got married at Blatchford Lake and moved to Whitehorse and is now a northerner. So that's my only southern recruiting story. But I guess it was because, and I worked for the federal government, so I wasn't subject to any of the aforementioned affirmative action policies. And I guess it was about what I was looking for, and that, you know, I'm not in a highly specialized or technical profession. And so I was able to look for the right fit, and that was the sort of HR policy of the Government of Canada, or at least it evolved into that. The processes, I think, as you point out, are the I can see where that wouldn't be possible if you were looking for a very particular skill set that wasn't necessarily in great abundance.
Thanks. We so we hire from the south more than I would like. For us, it would be great if we could hire from the north. You know, somebody that understands the north, understands the logistics and that. And that it would be great. Things we're doing to improve that. We started a junior safety officer program a year and a half ago now. So we hire basically 2 northerners with some work experience, but not the education and that. And so we're working with them on getting the education as well as the on-the-job training, so that at the end of we've set it up as a 2-year program. At the end of the 2 years, they'll meet the screening criteria for what we need. So we're trying to home grow our own safety officers, which I think is excellent. So, and that program will come to a close in June of this year, and we'll be going out for another 2. If we don't have vacancies at that time, then they'll be looking for jobs. And so, as Bronwyn said, you know, part of, to me, a success so that to me is truly the somebody is to be able to, at some point, to be able to let them go, so that somebody else, that they can grow. So a plug, if you know anybody that's looking for a junior safety officer position, keep your eye open in June, okay? Thanks.
And thank you for that question. Is there any other questions from the crowd? Yes, go ahead.
I love that you have sparkly managers, and of course you only get sparkly new professionals, but that don't help them out, that make them less sparkly to their managers.
Thank you. Judy, you want to start?
Since I said the word sparkle. Yeah, that does happen, unfortunately. Sometimes you have to evaluate it. Is it them that's not sparkling, or you're not sparkling? Or is it just not a match of the sparkles? We could go so far with that. Anyway, I think for me, you know, it's sometimes people come and they come with a sense of entitlement, or they come with that, well, I did you this favor, I moved to the north, or I did this, and it's like, it's a two-way street. And for me, as I said, you know, I'm pretty blunt about things, and well, I've learned to think before I speak. Need to have a talk about, you know, if it's an attitude problem, or if there's something that you've identified, and it's nipping it in the bud with that new professional before they get settled into the role. You know, that's what that probation period is, and I've learned this the hard way, I gotta tell you, but that's what that probation period is all about. You know, it's dealing with those things that are uncomfortable to talk about, perhaps, or things that, you know, it might be dishwasher issue this morning at work, and people don't put their stuff in the dishwasher. Drives me nuts. They said at the sink, well, your mother does not work here. So, you know, but it's dealing with those things and ending it, because those things become the mountains that next thing you know, you got inter-office issues going all about. So it's taking, you know, so when you have somebody that's not And what's the problem? You know, it may be simply they're homesick. It may be simply the apartment they moved into. It may not even be about me or about the job, but it's getting to the heart of it to see if we can fix it, and if we can't fix it, what do we got to do about it?
Really quickly, that's a really good question, and I think two things come to mind for me. One is, yeah, I mean, you know, we're all eager as young is never delegate upward that which you can do yourself. And it's the most important thing that you could be, I think, the most important thing you could be taught or told or offered as advice, because we all have authority, we all have leadership skills, we all have the ability to exact change and to do that which we were hired to do. And you don't more liberties with their authority than they have. I've only ever had that work positively. So to me, that was something that the clerk of the Privy Council of Canada told me, and well, maybe not me specifically. We didn't chat much, but for me, that was the lesson that I learned and one I wanted to carry through my career. Do everything you can. Don't need to ask permission. You have the authority.
I would say kind of 3 points that I'd like to make around this, and it's all around often people will come into new jobs and think like there's a lot on their shoulders, it's their responsibility to kind of know it already, or they'll expect that they need to do their work kind of quickly. Staff is that people will come and ask questions, ask for clarity, ask. That's something I train with my staff a lot. You know, who are you doing this for? What expectations do they have of your work? You know, what expectations I set with them very soon after they start with me about what my expectations are. But when we work together on a file, for example, going to the deputy minister, you know, what's on his agenda? What's his style? What's his approach to efforts? And that's really helped my staff understand how to approach work. But if they were trying to do that on their own without asking questions and without getting clarity, that would be very difficult. Another point versus, you know, just kind of working within your box is really thinking about, you know, beyond your division, beyond your department, beyond the GNWT, how all the pieces fit together, and really always keeping that in mind. And any task you do and how your work today is fitting into the broader strategic plan of your department, of your division, you know, of the GNWT. And that's really helped me move up through government because having your finger on the pulse, you're able to have, you know, very good discussions with people above you about the goings on around you. So really asking questions, providing clarity or getting clarity, and always keeping the system in mind is what I would probably say.
I've got nothing else. Skip over me right now. I'm not going to take up time for the sake of taking time. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You probably have a very good point there. I think one of the, I didn't mean that to you. You know, there can be many of the same things. People are unsure of their role. If people come in, and a couple of people have talked about having clear expectations. And certainly, you know, what I found that maybe more so with young professionals, new professionals, coming to a position with expectations that aren't matched by the workplace. And, you know, sort of a mismatch between expectation and reality can but for the most part, the issues between employees and managers, whatever their age, whatever their length of service, it can be the same, and they're often based on lack of clarity and misunderstanding. I think one of the differences that new professionals do bring that we didn't bring in my generation, many generations ago, is the social media and the morphing of sort of work life and home life. I mean, you can take your work, you've got your work with you all the time. When I started work, we went to work, we did our work. If we took it home with us, it was piles of paper in a briefcase. But now you can do it on your iPad. And so there is this is happening. Off, which can sometimes be very uncomfortable, can sometimes be confusing. When should you be getting overtime? So it's learning, I think, a different way of working together, of matching what young people are learning at school or experiencing, and just matching it to the workplace. And I think it's as much up to the workplace to adapt as it is to, it's a two-way street.
No, perfect. Thank you, Bronwyn. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, so when I came up here as a new professional, I was wondering about seeing a workforce that was so much more obviously we can't fix some of those systemic problems as hiring managers for a specific position. My cultural sensitivities or that consideration of the past, especially given the TRC report.
Thank you. Bronwyn, you want to start something?
Cultural sensitivity and awareness of the environment you're in are hugely important. It's sometimes hard to measure because it's easy to say the right thing. If you read at all, and people know what is considered appropriate. You can say the words, and actually, what you've raised is a really important issue because it's very hard to measure. The kind of behavior and the kind of expectations that we should have. I've seen people who have come in and actually worked with one person who really believed she knew it all, and she knew how Aboriginal people should be behaving, and she was going to teach them. And it was catastrophic. Well, as you can imagine, it was catastrophic. But I think there is maybe some characteristics which, even without being able to assess a person's particular knowledge and understanding of the North, you can are indicators of their openness to other people who are different, their acceptance of different ways of doing it. It's an openness of spirit, of mind, of heart, and that it's sort of very fundamental. And as it applies to our northern environment or any environment, it's in the person. And I did not answer your question.
And I could not say anything different or better. Oh, right, the mic. I've never had to consider that myself. Coming from down south, you're right. You get here and you see a lot of people who don't necessarily represent half the population working in the civil service. I think it's a very fair point, but to the confines of what we need to achieve with the people who are working with us. So if I need a policy analyst or a planning analyst or a data analyst, I need to find people who fit those skills, and that's my biggest concern as the manager. having the people who are then cognizant of their realities around them, that's sort of that existential addition to the role that I can't write into a job description, but I think is very important. I think for the overall public service, you're dealing with a more, a larger cultural issue than any one manager. But at the same time, recognizing that we can't beat ourselves up for something that we don't have control over if I'm a chief governance officer at the WSCC. So I don't know, that's how I kind of see that balance.
I don't have much to add there, except I think for me, cultural sensitivity and awareness even, for me, my horizons have been significantly broadened since arriving in the NWT. For sure, having come from PEI, small community, consultation, seeing the amount of engagement that we do, that's been huge for my learning opportunities. Learning and bringing new professionals into that and teaching them about the great opportunity for me as just as a public servant, as a person, but also as a hiring manager to really make sure that I'm able to provide that kind of learning that I had when Southern recruits do come, or when we have any staff here, to really let them know what we're doing and that the expectation is that they follow along.
You know, so having worked for Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada for a long period of time, it's a valuable question, and I worked with, at least that I know of, 2 residential school survivors for more than a decade. I worked with them, and I guess the only thing I can say is that I tried to listen very carefully to the people around me and their experiences, and to learn from them, and to fulfill the leadership role model. Doesn't answer the question about why is the public service not representative necessarily of the population here, but I guess I feel like I had the, I don't want to call it good fortune because that would be the wrong way to put it, but I'm humbled by the opportunities I've had to learn from the people of the Northern Territories and to then deploy my skills in service to them. And you know, I think about, I worked for an Aboriginal Broadcasting Society when I first came up here, and I had the chance
and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer your question any better. I think what we do in our organization, because a lot of what we deal with is the public and stakeholders and injured workers, employers, and so for us, a lot of our job is sometimes mediation between a worker and an employer. So whether they're, you know, from Nunavut or NWT or from some other province across Canada, part of it is understanding the culture they came from and where they asked us is say, well, back in the South we do it this way, or back in Ontario, well, if it's so great, go back there. So see, that's one of those things you should think before you speak. You know, and so, but those are the conversations we have. You know, we chose to come, we chose to live here, to work here, so we need to adapt to not forcing people to adapt to where we are. And so part of our conversations when we're working with stakeholders is understanding where they're coming from and their cultural differences, and then trying to figure out how we apply those cultural differences to meet the needs of the legislation. And sometimes that in itself becomes a challenge, but you know, most of the time it comes down to good communications, and that's part of the professionalism that we hire people in with, is that they have those communication skills.
Idea of what is the percentage of First Nations in the senior management positions?
I don't think I can, you know, I had this number just a few days ago. It's certainly at the deputies level. Or Aboriginal, not First Nations. So that's at the deputy level. At the senior management level, Heidi, you knew that number too last week. I'm wanting to say 32%. So yeah, that's senior management. Across government as a whole, I think it's about 39. That's, you know, I can't swear to that, but it's certainly in that range. And if you email me, I can give you the proper number.
Thanks for the question. Maybe I'll just end with one quick question about mentorship programs. As has been discussed today, new professionals are interested in receiving mentorship in many different ways, some formal, some a little bit more informal, some with goals, some with meetings. I was wondering if the panelists, maybe starting with Judy, could just briefly talk about new professional mentorship programs that they've found successful, maybe both as a mentor and someone being mentored.
Well, I think they're important. I know I've participated in formal mentorship programs as the mentoree and as the mentor, and I think they work really well. Probably, in all honesty, the ones I've had maybe more success with are the more informal ones, where sometimes I didn't even recognize that I was mentoring somebody until they said it. It was like, oh, really? I just thought we were friends. So, you know, but I think that's part of it, and I think mentors are everywhere, and it depends on the situation, you know. For myself, there's people that I go to that if I'm having a particular concern with my career in this area or in this area. So, but I think, you know, I sure wish, looking back now, that, you know, when I was that assistant to nobody, it sure would have been nice to have a mentor that I could have said, what do I do? You know, so I think that if anybody has the opportunity to participate in it, I don't think it necessarily
Yeah, I guess I'm a more of a kitchen table kind of mentor-mentee, and those conversations that have been most useful to me and those relationships that have been most useful to me have organically kind of developed out of the hopefully authentic relationships I was trying to create throughout my career. And so, you know, while I completely respect and have a bit of envy for those who can participate in the discipline of a formal mentorship program, I feel like, you know, for me, in either one of those roles, those informal moments have been the ones that have been most valuable. And to this day, peer mentors, people I work with and for, that comes from 360 degrees around me. And so I encourage you to maybe not wait till there's a formal opportunity out there. Find somebody that you think you have a connection to and ask them, yeah, hey, can I come for coffee? And I happen to have really good coffee in my office, so just saying.
I have no experience with a formal program at all, but to echo kind of what Zoe was saying there at the end, one experience I did have is I did pick up the phone and actually called someone that I actually have been kind of noticing has some qualities in management or in the GNWT knowledge base that maybe is beyond mine, and we do have chats, informal chats about or who you see is on a career perhaps similar to yours, and really talk to them and really ask them for their advice, because they always generally will have some nuggets for you as well. Thanks.
I also have never done a formal mentorship program, but everything that has been said holds totally true. I mean, my mentor, for lack of a better term, is a professor I had at SFU. He's the former deputy to cabinet in BC. He's a man who, if I could emulate everything Doug did in his life, I would do it. He's somebody who I still communicate with every couple months. You know, shoot an email back and forth. Here's what's going on. What do you think I should do? You know, relationship that somebody who's untainted, unencumbered by your normal life, by the things, everything else that's going on, that isn't worrying about what's going on in your family life or whatever, just focused on your job and what they think is interesting to you. If you can have somebody like that to talk to, I think it's really important. I mean, you can get that from a formal mentorship program. I know other people who have gone through those, and you can get that from a formal program like that. But I think just having that communication with somebody who you find interesting, that's interesting enough for you to just go and talk to, is super, super important. And just go ask them if they're willing to talk to you. You know, go out for coffee, go to their office, just have the conversations. They'll lead their own way, and you're going to be able to find some really interesting things, and they'll probably shoot you off to other people who they know you'll be interested in. So don't get so, you know, stuck to, I just need to talk to this person either.
And what we did was the two of us decided that we really didn't like the program, and we threw it out and just had coffee. We went to coffee, we went to lunch, we called one another, and you know, it became more of a friendship, so mutual support. And I really think that what Zoe said about looking at it sort of 360, you can get support and you can get guidance from anybody around you, including people who are very junior to you. You know, I get help every day from people. I can't operate my telephone without going to somebody for help. You know, in different ways, and it's good to ask. It's okay to ask, and just don't be afraid. You know, and I don't know anybody who isn't flattered if they get a call that says, "Hey, you know, I'd like your advice." You know, no matter what the relationship, but not your supervisor. That's a different relationship. That's it.
Thank you, Bronwyn. I'd like to take this opportunity to really thank our panel for coming out today. I think they represent a very strong and supportive public service that we have here in the NWT. Join me in thanking them. I'd now like to welcome my fearless leader, Shannon Crawley, to come up and
So again, thank you so much for taking the time. As I mentioned just before we got started, IPAC-NWT will be rolling out our mentorship program in early 2016. We're very excited about it, and we are currently seeking to add both mentors and associates seeking mentorship to our roster. Please get in touch with me if you have any interest in participating, or if you even have a contribution, especially based on what you heard today about what has worked well in the past. And lastly, I will just briefly say, many of our panelists noted the importance of collaborating across different levels of public service, and this is essentially one of the primary tasks of IPAC. We have an ongoing goal of promoting excellence, and if you are an IPAC member, please know that there are resources and forum available for you to share your experiences and seek information when you need it. And if you're not a member, this is just one of the many benefits of joining. So thank you very much everyone for coming today. Maybe since you have the mic, I'll invite you to This is for a free New Professionals membership for a year.
Kate Hearn.
The oldest